my beauty school series lesson number 2, and today is going to be all about how to avoid tiger stripes when highlighting. I feel like highlighting is actually one of the biggest things that students fresh out of school get intimidated to do, and it is because it's easy to have your foil slip. It's easy to kind of mess up in that area. So I'm going to teach you how to get a really tight weave, no tiger stripes, make it look beautiful. I'm going to show you little tips and tricks I have, my favorite foils that I like to use to achieve a really good highlight. I have like 5 different things I'll show you. So if you're interested in watching this, then stay tuned. Okay, so the foils and the tools that you use really do affect how your highlight turns out. So I'm going to go over my favorite foils to use. The ones that I like to use the most are the long Reynolds foils, the short Reynolds foils, FRAMAR silver foils, Product Club purple foils, and the Envy mesh foams. And I'm just going to show you how I use each of these things. Okay, step 1 is making sure your bleach is mixed to the correct consistency. If your bleach is too runny, it's going to cause your foils to slip and therefore create tiger stripes. I like to mix my bleach to like a pancake batter consistency, and that seems to work really well for highlighting. Alrighty, first foils up are the long Reynolds foils. These foils are great because you can use them with long and short hair since they are extra long. And I am now using my board. If you have been following me for a while, you know that I love using highlighting boards. And the reason for that is because it just helps so much. So, tip number 2. Using a highlighting board around the bottom of the head. As we all know, the head goes in and it kind of like caves in towards the bottom of the head and then it goes out. And as a student, I always felt like that was my hardest thing to grasp, is like I couldn't get my foils to stay towards the bottom of the head. I just felt like they always slipped. It was hard to get a good base, get your like bleach on the foil because it was always slipping. And even as like a new stylist, I struggled with that. And then I started using a board and it really changed the way I did things. I feel like you can get closer to the root. It gives you a steadier base to work on. The product stays in one place. It's really, really a great tip. So I use that towards the bottom of the head and I use it until I'm about halfway up the head actually, and it helps a lot. Tip number 3. So as you can see right here, I'm taking my brush full of product and I'm starting it about halfway down where her regrowth is. And the reason for that is because I don't want to take a brush full of bleach and put it straight to the scalp because that will oversaturate it and cause bleeding. So I like to take it halfway down and blend upwards, and that just creates a more subtle line. You're still going to get a tight, heavy weave, but it's not going to bleed. It's not going to create tiger stripes or swelling. Tip number 4 is all about tension. Whether you're using a board or not, it's really important to hold tension to your foils. As you can see here, I'm holding her hair really tight towards the bottom. The tighter you hold the hair, the more your foils are going to stay in place and not slip. I actually had a teacher in hair school tell me once that if someone weaved her hair and it hurt, she knew they were doing a good job, and that's because tension really is so important. Okay, next foils up are the short Reynolds foils. These are just the same as my previous foils. They're just a little more standard size, a little smaller. The reason that I love Reynolds foils so much is because they have a bumpy side and a smooth side. And the bumpy side is really great because it gives you kind of a grip to your foils and it makes the product go on really nicely, keeps the hair in place. So I always do it with bumpy side up, my product going on the bumpy side, and the smooth side out, if that makes sense. And that brings me to tip number 5, folding and tightening your foils. Everyone has a different way of folding their foils. I like to create a little lip with my weave comb and then put it in the hair, as you can see. And that gives me tension. It also lets me tighten my foils after I put my product on. So as you can see here, I'm putting my product on, then I'm gonna fold my foil up twice and tighten again. So then after I fold my foils, I use my little weave comb, tighten it one more time. That way it stays in place and it's extra secure. Tip number 6 is clean sectioning. You always want to have a vision for how you're parting your client's hair. As you can see with my model right here, I am bricklaying up the back of her head, utilizing angles in certain areas, but I have a vision for what I'm doing. You want to be really precise with how you put your product on. You don't want to grab a big random section and try to be sloppy and put your product on there because it's going to be splotchy, it's going to be a mess. You want to make sure that all the sections are even and clean. I know that's so basic, but it really does make a difference, I promise. And that goes hand in hand with making sure that each subsection and each piece that you're weaving is pretty thin. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to do baby lights, but the thinner the sectioning, the better the product goes on, the easier the lift. If you have really chunky highlights with lots of hair in your foils, it's pretty much guaranteed that you're going to get an uneven lift. It's going to be a little harder to lift. So I just say the thinner the better. It does mean more foils and a little more work, but we like to work for good hair, so just do it and it will be good, I promise. And next up on my roster full of my favorite foils is the FRAMAR Silver Foils. I love these foils, because they're extra thick, so it gives you a really good base to go off of. So you really don't need a board with these foils because they have enough base as it is. And they're pre-cut, which is really, really nice because with my Reynolds foils, I do have to pre-cut them before my client gets there. These ones come cut already, which is super nice. So as you can see right here with my client, I am going to section her off in the front, and I am doing a tiny section around her face, and I'm going to slice and weave really fine around her face to give her money pieces, make it brighter around the face. That way when she pulls her hair back, she's a little brighter around the face. A lot of clients always say that, I don't want to see brown when I pull my hair back. So we want to accommodate that with our clients. And I'm using the FRAMAR foils right here because I'm using very fine sectioning. Her hair is pretty fine around her face, and the FRAMAR foils are thick enough where it's going to be really a good foil for me to use because it's not going to slip like the Reynolds foils would. Those are better for the back of the head. Since the FRAMAR foils are heavier, they're going to stay in place. And as you can see, I'm using my FRAMAR tint brush, and this is a little smaller, a little more delicate. It's going to help me spread my product easier, and it's just like the best brush ever. I like to use this for balayaging and money pieces and defining like highlights around the face. So as you can see here, that's what I'm doing. And this foil is actually tip number 7 for you all. So if you feel like foil slippage is a problem that you've been having and you don't know what you're doing wrong, FRAMAR foils could actually be an answer to your prayers. Since they're a little heavier and a little more sturdy, it's easier for your foils not to slip because you have a sturdier base, they stay in place. I always feel secure using them because I know what they're gonna do. So if you feel like that's something you struggle with, I would definitely try these foils. Okay, so I also feel like the ear is a tricky part when it comes to weaving, so tip number 8 is to double up your foils above the ear. The reason I do this is because it gives me more to work with. It gives me like a steadier base, and so I double up my foils, and that way my foils stay secure. And I don't know, maybe that's weird, but I just feel like my foils stay in place better, and it's just a heavier, thicker foil. So if you didn't have FRAMAR foils, you could just take 2 Reynolds foils, double them up, and use that as like the first foil or 2 above the ear so that they stay in place really well. Okay, and tip number 9 is to extra secure your foils by folding them even more. So as you can see here, I did the little lip with my weave comb. I'm putting my product on, but I'm going to fold them a little differently this time, and this just makes sure that your foils stay really tight and secure. So if you have problems with slippage and getting tiger stripes, this will help you a ton. So I just tightened my foil, and then I wrapped it around on the left side and the right side, and I used to do this a lot when I was first starting out. Now that I've got my timing up and I'm a little more confident in weaving, I don't do it this way because I feel like it does slow me down a little bit, and it does take a little more time. But this way is really helpful if you feel like your foils are slipping because it keeps them extra secure. Another little trick you can use for above the ear is just using your board once again, because it does give you a good base above the ear. It keeps your foils in place. You can get tighter to the root. So as you can see here, I'm going to use my board above the ear, and you can see how much of a difference it does make. And if you tip your board up towards the root like you see me doing here, it actually helps you get closer to the root and gives you a more defined, precise weave. So that's a little trick I like to do with the board, because it really does get close to the root. So if you have a client that likes to be super blonde, super tight to the root, using a board really, really helps. So as you guys can see, I actually do get pretty close to the root. I feel like a lot of times in hair school, or just in the hair world in general, people tell you not to go all the way up to the root with your bleach. And the bleach that I use is Redken Flashlift, and it does not swell, at least for me it doesn't. In all of my experience, I have found that it actually has a pretty even lift, so I actually can get pretty close to the root with this particular lightener. There are other bleaches out on the market that do swell, and if you get really close to the root, it's going to create a problem. But like I said in my tip before, if you're not flooding the root with product, you're gonna be okay. And even though I'm getting pretty close to the root, I always like to turn my brush sideways and blend in that way, just so it's a softer look. But that's the reason I do get pretty close to the root. I've never had any issues with it before. I know some people get really scared of that, but trust me, try this lightener, try these techniques, and it will work for you. And I'm never touching the scalp with the lightener. It's just going as close to the root as I can without touching the scalp, just to clarify. Okay, tip number 10 is using MB mesh foams in place of foils. You guys have seen me use these in past videos. I normally only use them for like balayage and sombres and things like that, but you also can use them to highlight. And I would say these would be really good for someone who felt like they were struggling with slippage, tiger stripes, things like that. These don't slip really because they are a foam texture. As you can see, you can still get pretty close to the root. You can also grab those corners and adjust if you need to, like you see me doing right here. So I really do like them. They're also reusable, so you can wash them and use them again. So these are a really good alternative to foils, just if you don't feel like using foils. The only downside is you do have to layer one over the other like you see me doing here. Next foils up are these purple Product Club foils. These are actually pretty similar to the FRAMAR foils. The only difference is that they are a little bit smaller, a little thinner, but they are a similar texture. I like using these because they were a little easier to get. They were at Salon Centric. FRAMAR you used to have to order online. Now they're actually at Cosmoprof, so yay, they're easier to get, but these were a little easier to get my hands on, so I have used these in the past. I really like that they're purple. They come in all different colors, and so do FRAMAR. But the nice thing about like foils like these that come in different colors is if you're doing like a two-toned blonde where you're doing 3 highlights to 1 low light, you could do all of your highlights in like Reynolds foil or silver foil, and then do your low light in the purple foil or whatever color you choose. And then you can keep track of where your low light is and where your highlights are. So that's really cool about the colored foils, and it just makes your client extra pretty, so can't complain. Tip number 11 is doing a mohawk sectioning, as you can see me doing right here. There are so many different ways to part off hair when weaving. This is just what I have found is the easiest weave for me to do. I feel like since you're pulling the hair back towards you, you have more tension and you have more control over the hair. So I feel like whenever I do this, the blend is really perfect, really seamless. I don't get tiger stripes. I really love it. I do stand on a stool most of the time, so I'm taller than my clients, and that gives me more control as well. But I really do feel like parting the hair this way helps a lot. Me and my assistant just started pulling her foils out, and oh my gosh, look at these foils, you guys. As you can see, as we are pulling them out, very seamless, no splotting, no bleeding, no tiger stripes. They look really, really good. Okay, tip number 12, and this is my last and final tip. So as you all know, the root smudge is so in right now. So usually with a root smudge, I would do anywhere from like a level 5 to a level 7 on my client. And I actually am doing a root smudge on this client, but on the bottom half of her head, I wanted to show you guys what I would do if she didn't want a root smudge. So if you have a client that likes to be really, really blonde, you have to remember that toning her all one color isn't always necessarily the best answer. You have to treat the roots differently than you treat the ends. So, for example, if she has natural hair up top, her roots are going to lift a lot lighter than her ends. I have had so many girls at my salon be like, oh my gosh, I put this 9V all over my client and her roots went super silver and her ends didn't take it the same way. And it's because you have to keep in mind that those roots do lift quicker. So a really good way to soften those roots, but make sure they blend really well. And if you did get some tiger stripes or bleeding, which happens when you're in school, happens when you're new, heck, it happens all the time regardless. You know, it happens to all of us. We all make mistakes at some time. But a really good tip is using Redken Shades EQ 9NB and just softening that baseline with that color. It's not going to deepen it like a root smudge would, but it's just going to soften that transition line. And if you do have any lines, it'll help soften those as well. But that's a really good tip for like super, super blondes, is doing that root color with 9NB. And then if they like to be really icy, doing their ends with like 9V, 9T, whatever you decide to do. So if she's really blonde, that's what I would do. But if she wants a root smudge, I would do something else like I am doing here. So since she did want a root smudge look, I am doing a 6N in Shades EQ. And I like to do Goldwell color-ons and Shades EQ for my root smudges. You guys have seen me use Goldwell a lot. I'm going to use Shades right here because it's a little more translucent. It's easier to work with. I really like that gel texture. And the 6N is going to match her base really well, so that's why I chose that color. And as you can see right here, I'm putting it down about like 1.5 to 2 inches throughout her hair, but then around her hairline, I'm just barely tapping it around her roots so that those money pieces really stand out. So I'm going to let her root smudge process for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to tone her ends. Okay, first up, I have to address the elephant in the room, all the construction going on in the background. I promised you guys a salon tour a couple of videos back, and don't worry, I'm going to deliver, but there have been some ongoing projects at my salon. As you can see, the background is one of them. We are working on upgrading a lot of things, and I'm super excited because one of them is our wash wall. Our shiplap is gone, which I'm kind of sad about, but we're putting in this subway tile, which I'm super excited about. There have been a lot of changes since my last salon tour, and I'm so excited to show you guys. So that will be coming up in a few videos when all the transformations are done. So just be patient for that. Now I am toning my client's ends with a 9T 9B. She likes to be really, really ashy, like borderline silver hair. So this is what I'm going to give her, 9T 9B. She lifted like a dream, so she's going to be pretty silver, and I'm super excited for it. Shades EQ is my best friend when it comes to this, and this is going to give us that perfect silver blonde. And here is the final result. Her hair turned out so pretty. The lighting at my salon is pretty gold at night, so her roots look kind of gold, but I swear they weren't. So as you can see under here, the 9NB just softened her hair a little bit, but she's still really blonde. And then we did the root smudge up top, the icy ends. It just turned out so perfect, so pretty. She just has great hair. It always lifts so well for me. And as we turn her around to the other side, I'm going to lift her hair up so you guys can see what's going on in there. I feel like a lot of times people forget that the insides of the hair are just as important as the outsides of the hair. You want to be able to have solid work all the way around the head from top to bottom. You don't just want the top to look good. So as you can see here, we have no bleeding, no spotting, so pretty. I just wanted to share with you guys the tips and tricks that have helped me over the years as I've become more successful and learned what works for me, what doesn't. If you guys have any tips and tricks for me, leave them in the comments below. I'm always wanting to learn even more than I do because I feel like we never stop learning. And if you guys have any suggestions for what you want to learn from me, let me know in the comments below. This was the second video in the beauty school series, and I am so excited about this series. It's been so much fun to do. If you guys have any lessons you want to learn, let me know, and stay tuned for next week's video. It'll be lesson number 3.